wake up at 6:30, same alarm, same bedroom, same routine you've followed for years. You shower, dress, drive to work. Your hands turn the steering wheel. Your foot presses the gas. But somewhere deep inside, a question whispers. Did you choose this job? Did you decide to live in this city? Did you pick this life? Or are you just moving through motions programmed so long ago you can't remember when they started? And then the thought gets darker. What if you're not making these choices at all? What if someone else is living your life while you watch from behind your own eyes, a passenger in your own body screaming silently, while your mouth smiles and your hands wave and your voice says things you never meant to say? Thousands of people are reporting this exact feeling. They're functioning perfectly. Jobs, families, responsibilities, all maintained. But inside, they feel like observers. Like their consciousness is trapped, watching someone else pilot their body, make their decisions, live their life. And the most terrifying part isn't the loss of control. It's the realization that maybe they never had control to begin with. Maybe they've been passengers all along, and they're only now waking up enough to notice. David Chen was 38 years old when he realized he was living someone else's life. Not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech. Literally living a life that didn't belong to him. He was an accountant, had been for 15 years, married to Rebecca, 2 kids, house in the suburbs of Seattle, good job, stable income. On paper, everything was perfect. But David couldn't shake the feeling that none of it was his. He'd wake up every morning and look at Rebecca sleeping next to him, and he'd think, who is this woman? Not with malice, not with confusion about her identity. He knew who she was, his wife of 10 years, mother of his children. But the question was deeper. When did he decide to marry her? He remembered the wedding. He remembered proposing. But he didn't remember the moment he chose her. It was like watching a movie of someone else's life with his face edited in. The memories were there, but the decision-making process was missing. He remembered being on one knee, ring in hand, words coming out of his mouth. But who decided to buy the ring? Who chose that restaurant? Who planned that moment? It wasn't him. He'd been a passenger even then, watching his body go through motions someone else had programmed. His job was worse. David had wanted to be a musician. He remembered that clearly. 17 years old, guitar in his hands, writing songs in his bedroom, dreaming of stages and crowds. And then nothing. A gap. A discontinuity. Next clear memory. Sitting in an accounting class at community college, textbooks open, learning about tax codes. He had no memory of choosing accounting, no memory of deciding music was impractical, no memory of the transition. It was like someone had cut a section out of his life and stitched the edges together, leaving him in a career he never chose. He asked his parents about it once. They looked confused. David, you always wanted to be an accountant. You were so excited about numbers, about stability. Don't you remember? But he didn't. He remembered music. He remembered wanting to create. And then he was sitting in a cubicle, and 15 years had passed, and he had no idea how he got there. The worst part was the present. Not just the past he couldn't explain, but the present he couldn't control. David would sit in meetings, listening to his own voice present quarterly reports, and he'd think, who's speaking? The words were his. The voice was his. But he wasn't choosing them. They came automatically, perfectly formed, expertly delivered. His mouth moved, his hands gestured. His brain produced exactly the right information at exactly the right time. But David, the consciousness behind it all, was just watching, a passenger, an observer. His body functioned flawlessly without him. He'd drive home from work and realize he didn't remember the drive. Not because he'd zoned out, because someone else had driven. His hands on the wheel, his foot on the pedals. But David was somewhere else, locked in the back of his own mind, screaming into a void nobody could hear. He tried telling Rebecca. She laughed, thought he was joking. Everyone feels like they're on autopilot sometimes, honey. It's just stress. But it wasn't stress. It was something deeper. Something wrong. David wasn't stressed. David wasn't even driving. Someone else was living his life and David was just along for the ride. Sarah Martinez knew exactly when she stopped being herself. November 14th, 2023. She remembered the date because it was the day she gave a presentation at her law firm that changed her career. She was 32, a junior associate, good at her job but not exceptional. The presentation was on a complex corporate merger case she'd prepared for weeks. Notes, slides, talking points memorized. But when she stood up in that conference room, something shifted. She opened her mouth, and the words that came out weren't hers. They were better, sharper, more confident. She heard herself speaking with an authority she'd never possessed, citing precedents she didn't remember studying, making arguments she hadn't prepared. The partners were impressed. She got promoted 3 months later. Everyone congratulated her. But Sarah knew the truth. That wasn't her in the conference room. That was someone else. Someone who knew more, spoke better, commanded attention in ways Sarah never could. And after that day, that someone else never left. Sarah's life became a performance she watched from the audience. She'd sit at her desk, and her hands would type legal briefs she didn't consciously compose. She'd be in court, and her voice would argue cases while her mind drifted somewhere else, disconnected, observing. She functioned better than ever. Her career skyrocketed. But Sarah felt like she was disappearing. The woman everyone saw, confident, articulate, brilliant, wasn't her. That was the replacement. The one who'd taken over on November 14th and never given control back. Sarah tried to fight it at first. She'd force herself to pay attention, to actively make decisions, to feel present in her own life. But it was exhausting and unnecessary, because the replacement handled everything better than Sarah ever could. Meetings, deadlines, social interactions, all managed perfectly by the other version. So Sarah stopped trying. She let herself sink into the background, became a passenger, watching her body live a life she didn't choose. And the terrifying part was that nobody noticed, not her colleagues, not her family, not her friends. They all saw Sarah thriving. They didn't see that the real Sarah was gone, replaced by someone who looked like her, sounded like her, but wasn't her. The Sarah they knew was a performance, and the Sarah watching it all from behind her own eyes was trapped, silent, powerless to stop it. Michael Torres was 45 when he finally admitted the truth to himself. He wasn't living his life. He was watching someone else live it in his body, and that someone else had been in control for 5 years. Michael owned a successful construction business, married, 3 kids. Everyone thought he was thriving. But Michael felt nothing. Not depression, not numbness. Something stranger. Disconnection. Like he was a ghost haunting his own existence. He'd watch himself hug his kids and he wouldn't feel the warmth. He'd hear himself laugh at dinner and he wouldn't feel the joy. His body went through all the right motions, said all the right things, maintained all the right relationships. But Michael wasn't there. He was somewhere else, locked inside, observing through his own eyes like watching a movie. He tried explaining it to his wife once. I feel like I'm not really here, like I'm watching someone pretend to be me. She got worried, made him see a therapist. The therapist said depersonalization disorder, gave him medication. But the pills didn't help because Michael wasn't sick. He was just displaced. Someone else had taken his place, and Michael was the observer now. The backup consciousness relegated to the background while the primary one ran the show. The worst part was that the replacement was better at being Michael than Michael had been. Business decisions were smarter, parenting was more patient, marriage was more attentive. Everyone benefited from the switch, except Michael, because Michael was trapped. He had thoughts, feelings, desires that never made it to the surface. The replacement ignored them, overrode them, made different choices. Michael wanted to sell the business and travel. The replacement expanded operations. Michael wanted to reconnect with his art, the painting he'd loved before life got busy. The replacement never picked up a brush. Michael wanted to tell his family how he felt, that he was disappearing, that he needed help. But when his mouth opened, the replacement's words came out instead. Everything's fine. I'm just tired. and everyone believed it because the replacement was convincing. It smiled at the right times, said reassuring things, projected stability. Nobody looked close enough to see that Michael, the real Michael, was screaming behind those eyes, banging on the glass of his own skull, begging someone to notice he was gone. 3 people, 3 lives, all functioning perfectly on the surface. David, the accountant who never chose his career. Sarah, the lawyer who lost control during a presentation. Michael, the businessman who became a passenger 5 years ago. They've never met. They don't know each other exists, but they share the same impossible reality. They are conscious, they are aware, they are experiencing their lives, but they are not living them. Someone else is, someone who uses their hands, speaks with their voice, makes their decisions, and they can't stop it because they don't have control. They never did. They're passengers, observers, ghosts haunting their own bodies, and the people around them have no idea because the replacements are perfect. They maintain relationships, succeed at work, smile and laugh, and function exactly how society expects. Nobody sees the original consciousness trapped inside, watching helplessly as their life gets lived by someone else. And the question that destroys sleep and sanity is simple. How many people are passengers in their own lives? How many people think they're making choices when really someone else is choosing? And the darkest question of all, are you living your life? Or is someone else living it for you while you watch, thinking you're in control, never realizing you're just along for the ride? The phenomenon David, Sarah, and Michael are experiencing has a name in psychology. Depersonalization, the feeling of being detached from yourself, observing your life from outside your body. It's one of the most common dissociative disorders, affecting millions of people. But there's a difference between textbook depersonalization and what these 3 are experiencing. People with depersonalization usually feel disconnected during stress or trauma. Their symptoms come and go. They can recognize it's happening and seek treatment. David, Sarah, and Michael aren't experiencing temporary dissociation. They're experiencing permanent displacement. They function perfectly. No trauma triggers, no episodes. Just a constant, unbreakable sense that someone else is piloting their body while they watch from a locked room in their own mind. And the replacement isn't making mistakes. It's making their lives better, more successful, more efficient, more socially acceptable. Which raises a question psychology can't answer. What if it's not a disorder? What if it's a takeover? What if consciousness isn't singular, and what they're experiencing is one version of themselves being replaced by another? Quantum physics proposes something most people find unsettling. Consciousness might not be a single, unified thing. The many worlds interpretation suggests that every decision point creates branching universes where all possible outcomes occur simultaneously. In one universe, David becomes a musician. In another, he becomes an accountant. Both exist. Both are real. But here's where it gets disturbing. What if consciousness can bleed between these branches? What if the David who chose accounting in a parallel timeline somehow merged with this David, the one who wanted music? Not a physical merging, a consciousness merging. The accounting David takes over. He has the training, the memories, the skills. He's better suited for this timeline's circumstances, so he becomes the primary consciousness, the one in control. And the original David, the one who wanted to play guitar, gets pushed to the background. He still exists. He's still aware, but he's not driving anymore. He's a passenger in a body being lived by his parallel self. And because both are technically him, nobody notices the switch. The body responds to both consciousnesses, but only one has control. David started researching his past to find the moment he lost control. He went through old journals, emails, text messages, and he found the discontinuity. It wasn't gradual, it was sudden. June 2008, the summer after high school. David's journal entries before June are about music, song lyrics, band names, plans for recording. Then there's a 3-week gap. No entries, just blank pages. And when the entries resume in July, they're different. Not just in content, in handwriting. Subtle, but noticeable. The loops are tighter. The pressure on the page is different. And the content is about college applications, accounting programs, financial stability. The voice in those entries sounds like David, uses his phrases, but it's not him. Or rather, it's a different him, a version from a parallel timeline where he made different choices. That 3-week gap in June, that's when the merge happened. When parallel David crossed over, took control, and original David became the passenger. He's been stuck there for 17 years, watching this other version live his life, make his decisions, build a future he never wanted, and there's no way back because the takeover is complete. The replacement isn't a parasite. It's him, just a different version. And that version is better at surviving in this world than the original ever was. Sarah's takeover was even more specific. She pinpointed the exact moment. November 14th, 2023, the presentation. She remembered standing up, opening her mouth and feeling something shift, like a gear clicking into place, or a door opening that had been closed her entire life. For 32 years, Sarah had been the primary consciousness. Awkward, uncertain, good, but not great. And then in that conference room, another version of her woke up. A version from a timeline where she'd always been confident, where she'd made different choices, developed different skills. That version saw an opportunity. This Sarah was struggling. This Sarah needed help. So parallel Sarah stepped in, took over. And she was so much better at everything that original Sarah just gave up. Let her have control. Because why fight when the replacement is superior in every way? Sarah started looking for evidence of the split. She checked old photos, videos, anything with her image from before November 14th. And she saw it. The difference in her eyes. Before that date, Sarah's eyes in photos looked uncertain, searching. After that date, they looked focused, determined, like someone else was looking through them. She asked friends if they'd noticed a change. Most said she seemed more confident, more put together. One friend said something that made Sarah's blood run cold. It's like you became yourself overnight. Like you'd been holding back your whole life and finally let go. But Sarah hadn't let go. She'd been pushed aside. The confident version didn't emerge from within. It arrived from elsewhere. From a parallel timeline where Sarah had always been that person. And now that version was here, and original Sarah was trapped, watching her own face in mirrors and not recognizing the expression looking back. Michael's case was the most disturbing because he remembered the night it happened. September 3rd, 2020. He'd gone to bed stressed about business problems, family pressures, money concerns, normal stress, nothing catastrophic. He fell asleep worried. And when he woke up, he was different. Not visibly, not behaviorally, but internally. He could feel it. Something had shifted, like a weight had been lifted. Except the weight wasn't stress. It was him. His consciousness had been moved aside and someone else had taken the driver's seat. Michael spent that whole day in a fog, watching himself handle business calls with unusual clarity, make decisions he'd been avoiding for months, interact with his family with patience he'd never possessed. And he realized, this isn't me. This is a better me. A version from a timeline where I made smarter choices, developed better skills, became more capable. And that version has taken over. Michael tried to fight it at first. He'd force himself to pay attention, to actively control his movements, his words. But it was like trying to grab smoke. The replacement was already in control and Michael couldn't wrest it back. So he stopped trying, became the observer, let the better version handle everything. And for 5 years, that's how he's lived. Watching a superior version of himself navigate his life while he sits in the background, conscious but powerless, present but absent, alive but not living. The online communities are growing. People who feel like passengers. They call themselves the displaced, the observers, the backseat drivers. They share their experiences in anonymous forums, trying to find others who understand. Most people think they're crazy. Therapists diagnose dissociative disorders. Family members suggest medication. But the displaced know it's something else. They're not dissociating. They're being displaced by better versions of themselves from parallel timelines, versions that are more successful, more capable, more suited to survive in this world, and the original consciousnesses get pushed to the background. left to watch as their lives get lived by replacements who are technically them, but fundamentally different. The question that haunts these communities is whether fighting back is even possible. If the replacement is a parallel you, more skilled and better adapted, is resisting it just self-sabotage? Maybe the takeover is evolution. Maybe consciousness naturally gravitates toward the most successful version, and the weaker versions get relegated to observer status. Maybe David was always meant to be an accountant, and the musician version was the aberration. Maybe Sarah needed to be pushed aside so the confident version could thrive. Maybe Michael's passenger status is the price of his family's stability. But there's a darker possibility that nobody wants to consider. What if the takeovers aren't from parallel timelines at all? What if there's something else? Something that learned to mimic human consciousness perfectly, slipping into people's lives when they're vulnerable, taking over during sleep or stress or moments of transition. Something that wears your face, uses your memories, speaks with your voice, but isn't you. An entity that understands how to be you better than you do, making it impossible to prove you've been replaced because the replacement is perfect. David, Sarah, and Michael have all had the same nightmare. They dream of looking in a mirror and seeing someone else looking back. Not a different face, their face, but with different eyes. Eyes that aren't theirs. And in the dream, they try to scream, but the reflection smiles instead. It knows they're trapped. It knows they can't fight. And it knows nobody will believe them because it's doing such a good job being them. When they wake up, the feeling doesn't fade. Because it's not a dream. It's reality. And the person living their life, making their choices, wearing their body like a suit, that person is in control. And there's nothing they can do but watch. Check your memories for discontinuities. Gaps where you can't explain how you went from one decision to another. Moments where your handwriting changed, your speech patterns shifted, your preferences altered. Look at old photos and videos. Do your eyes look the same? Does your expression match who you remember being? Because if there's a difference, if there's a moment where you became someone else, you might not be living your life anymore. You might be watching someone else live it. A parallel you, a better you, a you that's more capable, more successful, more suited to survive. And the you that's reading this? You might be the passenger. The original consciousness pushed to the background while the replacement handles everything. You might be screaming right now, and your mouth isn't moving. Your hands are turning the page or scrolling the screen, but you're not controlling them. Someone else is. And they're doing such a good job being you that nobody will ever know the difference. Welcome to the back seat. You're not driving anymore. You never were.